I think the basic point is we need a world in which cooperation is the dominant mode, whether that's to fight a pandemic or to fight climate change or to promote development. We can't do this in a divided world. And yet the tensions between the US and China have been rising, I think dangerously so, and I believe unnecessarily so. So that puts me a bit at odds with a lot of people in the United States, I would say most of the political class at this point, which takes it more or less for granted that China's an enemy. At best, will have harsh competitive relations, could get worse. I view all of that as wrong-spirited, wrong-headed, bad analysis, contrary to my own eyes and ears over the past 40 years. I've been going to China since 1981, typically a couple of times a year at a minimum, often several times a year. I've been all over China for decades, visiting remote areas, visiting Western China, Xinjiang, visiting Tibet, visiting Yunnan, visiting the coastal regions. And I do not see China as the enemy. I do not see China as the hostile force out to undermine U.S. well-being, which is actually even taken as an article of faith in our formal foreign policy documents, that China is out to undermine the United States and undermine the world. I think that this is a absolutely dangerous perspective. And by the way, if you believe it, the solution is sit down and negotiate and talk to the other side and solve problems, but not this kind of name-calling, shouting through the press. Of course, it was even more insane when we had a president on Twitter, because we should not have politicians on Twitter. I'm not sure we should have Twitter at all, frankly, but we should not be doing foreign policy by tweets. We should be discussing, solving, brainstorming, presenting evidence, analyzing, but not just name-calling, unilateral sanctions, attacking Chinese companies, warning, as our officials do everywhere in the world, don't you dare buy from Huawei. This will cause great damage to your relations with the United States. We're making threats all over the world that aim to really stop China's continued economic and technological development. I think it's disgusting and stupid, frankly. Those are the two adjectives that I would use. They do not comport with our well-being, with our national needs, and certainly not with the world's needs. That's what I called out. There aren't too many voices in the United States, unfortunately, calling for balance. We have both political parties that are anti-China. The Biden administration, just about every time it opens its mouth about China, is negative. Trump was crazy, so that was erratic. But Biden is not positive, not even neutral, and not so far saying, let's sit down and negotiate. In fact, the formal position is we're not going to have a strategic dialogue with China because we can't trust them, and we don't come out well in such strategic discussions. That's always a mistake. President Kennedy said, let us never negotiate out of fear, but let us never fear to negotiate. That is the right position. And the position is sit down and talk, because so much is a misunderstanding, so much is biased thinking, so much is lack of perspective, that unless we talk, we can't understand each other and we can't solve problems. The U.S. is the one that walked out of all the agreements, that doesn't abide by international agreements. We're the one that say, no, no, we're not going to be part of the International Criminal Court. We're the one that is not a party to Convention on Biological Diversity. We're not a signatory of the International Covenant of Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights. There are so many parts of international law that we don't abide by because a lot of United States action really is in the kind of Trump mindset. He put it, vulgarly and crudely, but it is no one's going to tell us what to do. Not the UN, not anyone else, as if law is some kind of punishment. Well, if you think that you're almighty, then you say, I don't want to be constrained by international law. And that has been a U.S. view of the U.S. right wing for a long time. But I think China actually wants international law because they see that with international law, they wouldn't be held back. They would be responsible for their own development. I think that they are proud and believers that if they have an international rule of law, they're going to thrive. I think that's true too. It's a very talented nation, a great civilization, a great history, a lot of catching up to do because of the horrible period under European and Japanese imperial pressure and war. So China's catching up. Good. That's what I would like to see in the world. Countries overcoming a sorrowful past history that had a lot to do with the imperial dominance, which was the 19th and 20th century experience up until the mid-century of the 20th century after World War II. And that's not pernicious, that's not against U.S. interests, but it is pro-China interest. And my feeling is that's great. I want to see China develop. But American policymakers are, they're horrified. Oh, they'd be bigger than us. Well, yeah, they have 4 times the population. So, of course, China would be bigger than us. Oh, they would catch up in technology. Yeah, why not? Capable people investing heavily in research and development. The idea